Before men built kingdoms, before laws, before empires, there was one truth the world already understood. Power rules. Not morality, not fairness, not kindness. Power. And no figure in mythology embodied that truth more completely than Zeus, king of Olympus, god of thunder, ruler of gods and men. But Zeus was not worshipped because he was good. He was worshipped because he was dominant. That is the truth modern men fear. The world does not naturally submit to virtue. It submits to force, to certainty, to authority, to the man who enters a room already believing it belongs to him. And Zeus understood something few men ever learn. Dominance is psychological before it is physical. People think power begins with muscles, with violence, with status. No! Real dominance begins in the mind. Because before Zeus ruled the heavens, he first conquered fear. Think about who he was born against. Cronus, a titan, a father so terrified of losing power that he devoured his own children. That is what weak rulers do. They consume potential because they fear replacement. But Zeus survived, hidden away, raised in secrecy, waiting. Not for permission, for timing. And that's the first law of dominance. Powerful men do not rush. They prepare. Weak men react emotionally. Strong men calculate. Zeus did not challenge Cronus as a boy. He waited until he was ready to destroy him completely. Then he struck. And when he didn't ask for equality. He didn't negotiate. He took the throne. That is the difference between ambitious men and dominant men. Ambitious men want success. Dominant men want control. After defeating the Titans, Zeus stood above all existence. Sky, storms, law, fate. Everything answered to him. But here's the part people misunderstand. Zeus did not rule because he was loved. He ruled because everyone understood. He could not be challenged without consequence. That is the psychology of dominance. Not popularity, not approval, presence. A dominant man changes the atmosphere when he enters. People feel him before he speaks. Because certainty radiates. Weakness hides. Dominance announces itself without words. Most men today have been trained out of dominance. They apologize for ambition, shrink their opinions, fear confrontation, need validation before they act. Zeus would have laughed at them, because dominance requires one thing most people will never develop: self-belief strong enough to survive rejection. Do you think Olympus respected Zeus because he was kind? No! They respected him because he was willing to carry responsibility no one else could. That's the hidden burden of dominance. The man at the top carries the storm alone. Everyone wants authority. Few men can survive the isolation that comes with it. And that is why dominant men are often misunderstood. People mistake decisiveness for arrogance, control for coldness, standards for ego, because weak people interpret confidence as threat. Zeus did not ask to be accepted. He expected obedience. An expectation changes reality. This is where modern men fail. They negotiate with life. They ask timidly, wait cautiously, move carefully. But the world belongs to men who decide. Dominance is not aggression. It is certainty. The certainty that you will act. The certainty that pressure will not move you. The certainty that fear will not control your choices. That is why Zeus ruled gods, because even gods trusted his conviction more than their own doubt. But dominance has a dark side, and Zeus is proof of it. Because when power goes unchecked, it begins to consume itself. The same confidence that creates kings can create tyrants. The same certainty that builds empires can blind men to consequence. Zeus conquered everything outside himself, but struggled to control what was inside himself. Desire, impulse, ego. And this is the paradox of dominance. A man can rule the world and still be a slave to himself. That is why true power is rare. Most men can control others. Few can control themselves. A man who dominates others is feared. A man who dominates himself is unstoppable. That is the evolution Zeus never fully completed. Because external power without internal discipline always creates chaos. And yet, despite his flaws, despite his excess, despite his darkness, the world still remembers him as king. Why? Because power leaves echoes. History does not remember passive men. It remembers the men who imposed their will on reality. Men who entered chaos and forced order from it. Men who refused to kneel. That is what Zeus represents. Not perfection. Authority. The willingness to stand above fear, doubt, and resistance, and declare, I decide what happens next. And every man faces this battle, not against titans, not against gods, against hesitation, against weakness, against the part of himself that wants comfort instead of conquest. Because inside every man, there is a throne, and most abandon it. They let fear rule them, emotion rule them, distraction rule them. Then they wonder why their lives feel small. A king without control becomes chaos. A man without control becomes invisible. Zeus teaches one brutal lesson. If you do not rule your mind, something weaker will. And weakness spreads fast. One excuse becomes a habit. One fear becomes identity. One moment of surrender becomes a lifetime of mediocrity. Dominance begins the moment you stop negotiating with your potential. The moment your word becomes law to yourself. So no, Zeus was not moral. He was not balanced. He was not perfect. He was something far more important. He was undeniable. And the world has always belonged to undeniable men. So when life tests you, when pressure rises, when doubt enters your mind, ask yourself, who rules your kingdom? Fear, comfort, weakness, or you? Because every man becomes a servant to something, and only a few become kings. Zeus did not become ruler of Olympus because fate chose him. He became ruler because he acted like a king before the world gave him the throne. That is the psychology of dominance.